I rise to move the second reading of the bill shortly entitled Seventh-day Adventist Church Incorporation Amendment Bill 2019. And in doing that, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a brief statement in respect of the importance of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in respect of St. Kitts and Nevis, and why the administration sees it fit to ensure that that organization is properly constituted and has the legal standing to engage in its own business as an organization. Mr. Speaker, before I look at the construct of the bill, which is a short bill, I wish to state that the Seventh-day Adventists are a conservative Protestant body of evangelical Christians whose faith is grounded in the Bible. And to stress also that it is a fundamental church. It believes in the resurrection, the birth, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and the importance of the resurrection as part of man's activity as religious persons. The Seventh-day Adventists place emphasis on the development of the whole person. I think that is very critical. And as such, in addition to the spiritual focus of the salvation of man, they promote healthful living, academic and intellectual development for its members and for anyone who wishes to support their doctrine and their approach to human development. Globally, they operate a large array of hospitals, clinics, and retirement homes. Additionally, Seventh-day Adventists operate one of the world's largest faith-based school systems with over 8,500 primary, secondary, and tertiary institutions. Along with the formal academic training provided to the school system, and we are aware that they have one of the very strong primary schools here in St. Kitts in the Newtown area, which has provided very sound education, not just in their religious or their doctrine, but general education as a primary school. And from all reports, the standard of education which is provided there and teaching is very commendable. So, Mr. Speaker, in addition to the formal education process, the Seventh-day Adventists also engage in social, physical, and recreational needs of the young people through their various youth ministry programs, such as the Pathfinder and Adventurer Clubs. And yesterday, Mr. Speaker, we had in this chamber the Youth Parliament. And as we are now witnessing the Parliament itself in operation, but yesterday with the youth operating, the Seventh-day Adventist Church provided in uniform the person who acted as the Sergeant at Arms in the Pathfinder uniform. Another area of importance to the Seventh-day Adventists is that of humanitarian endeavors. The church believes that the ministry of compassion is a biblical mandate that must be followed. And, Mr. Speaker, it is important that we look back over the years in which our country, St. Kitts and Nevis, has suffered effects of hurricanes, and the Seventh-day Adventists, through their Adventist Development and Relief Agency, ADRA, were always one of the agencies which provided support, relief for those persons who suffered any damaged or hurt during those storms, Mr. Speaker. And it is in that context, Mr. Speaker, that we want to give the support of the government to ensure that this religious organization, this Christian organization, is given the support of the government. And as minister with responsibility for ecclesiastical affairs, that is matters to do with the church, it is therefore my responsibility in this parliament to propose the amendment to an existing piece of legislation which we are seeking today to amend. And that bit of legislation, which was passed in this House in in 1996 and amended subsequently, and is down as Chapter 24.08 in the laws of St. Kitts and Nevis as a Seventh-day Adventist Church Incorporation Act. Now, Mr. Speaker, there have been changes which the organization, to which the organization has gone, and the leaders of that organization, the Seventh-day Adventists, have asked that the amendment to regularize their incorporation and the titling of their organization be done here in the Parliament. And if I may give, Mr. Speaker, just a small background as to how the need for the change came about before looking at the legislation itself or the bill itself, it would clarify matters as to why the church leaders have asked for this to be done. And this is the background, Mr. Speaker. St. Kitts and Nevis form part of a 5-island regional grouping, with the other islands being Antigua and Barbuda and Montserrat. These 5 islands were once part of a larger body called the North Caribbean Conference, which was subdivided in 2011 to form the South Leeward Mission. Once a mission is fully developed, Mr. Speaker, it acquires conference status. And conference status is equivalent to, as I say, the organization coming of age, having its own identity, its own corporate structure and nomenclature, which then has to be rectified in the laws of St. Kitts and Nevis or any state in which the organization operates. So we have, Mr. Speaker, in May 2019, the South Leeward Mission transitioned into conference status and thus became the South Leeward Conference. It has therefore become necessary for the Act of Incorporation to be amended to reflect the current status of the church in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. And it brings me then to the point of looking at the legislation itself to see what the legislation of the bill says in respect of making the amendment. And the bill, Mr. Speaker, to amend the Seventh Adventist Church Incorporation Act, Chapter 24.08, and it is said, be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the National Assembly of St. Christopher and Nevis, and by the authority of the same as follows. The bill may be cited as the Seventh Adventist Church Incorporation Amendment Bill 2019, and it speaks to the interpretation. In this bill, Principal Act means the Seventh-day Adventist Church Incorporation Act, to which I referred earlier. The short title of the Principal Act is amended by deleting the words Seventh Adventist as 2 separate words and substituting the words to Seventh-day as the new nomenclature for that phrase or that naming of the act. The amendment of the long title of the act, Mr. Speaker, The Principal Act is amended in the long title by repealing it as follows. And it says, an act to incorporate the South Leeward Conference of Seventh-day Adventists and to provide for related or incidental matters. Now, those related or incidental matters would refer to all of the activity in which the Seventh-day Adventist Church, or this in the Southern Conference, Southern Leeward Conference, will engage in the performance of its functions as an organized church in the Southern Leeward Conference. And permit me to read, Mr. Speaker, and there are just a couple of brief paragraphs to give the explanation fuller content and to explain a bit more. The Principal Act is amended by inserting a preamble immediately after the long title as follows. And I will read, Mr. Speaker, for the record. Whereas there has been constituted a conference known as the South Leeward Conference of Seventh-day Adventists on the 4th day of May 2019, consisting of the churches in Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Montserrat, which have been officially organized and accepted into the fellowship by vote of the delegates assembled in session and in accordance with the Constitution of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. And it then goes on to look, and that is the basis on which the change and the amendment is being accepted, that in conference, this change or this amendment to their own constitution in assembly was made to give credence to the new nomenclature of the organization. Mr. Speaker, there is another amendment, the amendment of Section 2. And the Principal Act, it says, is amended by repealing Section 2 and substituting a new Section 2, which is in the Act or in the bill as follows, Mr. Speaker. And I just read a small portion of that because it is really just explanatory and not really doing any damage if it is not read in full. The Board of Trustees, consisting of the President for the time being of the South Leeward Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, the Secretary for the time being of the South Leeward Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, the Treasurer for the time being of the South Leeward Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, and one other person to be appointed in accordance with the Constitution of the South Leeward Conference of Seventh-day Adventists shall be and is created and is hereby created a body corporate by the name of the Board of Trustees of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, hereinafter called the Board of Trustees. And Mr. Speaker, this is really to give the legal framework and the legal construct for this newly formed church organization, which was formerly part of the Northern Caribbean District of Seventh-day Adventists. The amendment is Section 7, amendments of Section 3 and 4. And permit me also to read, Mr. Speaker. The Principal Act is amended in Sections 3 and 4 by deleting the words seventh day and substituting the words wherever they may appear to seventh day, and the deleting words North Caribbean Conference of Seventh-day Adventists wherever they appear, and substituting the words South Leeward Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. Mr. Speaker, it may sound like just going around in circles, but when one is dealing with the law, and one is dealing with matters which may be questioned, and there may be challenges, and because once there is anything in the public domain and we're involved with people, there can always arise or can arise certain matters which lead to litigation or questions. but also for the church itself to have the correct document or the correct name, so that any document which it issues or any business in which it is engaged is done in accordance with the law and is clear and there is no ambiguity. So the first Seventh Adventist was seventh day, with the day being a capital. They're changing that to the day after the hyphen being a common D. So that, Mr. Speaker, may seem like nothing, but the lawyers among us and the lawyers in St. Kitts and Nevis and the world over will know that there could be litigation, questions raised by a simple matter, a matter as simple as that. And the last amendment, Mr. Speaker, is this. Amendment of Act by addition of Section 6. So there now is an addition, further explaining and giving the full context of why we are making this amendment and this request of this assembly. And it reads, the Principal Act is amended by inserting a new Section 6 immediately after Section 5. And if I may look at Section 5, it speaks to the saving of the nothing in this act shall affect the rights of the crown, her heirs or successors in any body, politic or corporate, or any other persons except such as are mentioned in this act, and those claiming by, through, from, or under them. Now that is the original act, the original section. The new section, which is being inserted, will be read as follows. There is hereby established a body to be known as the South Leeward Conference of Seventh Adventists, or by any such name that the Caribbean Union of Seventh Adventists hereafter approves. So it is saying that giving the legal framework for any changes, but setting out the new construct of this organization known as the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the region, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, it may appear to have been not unnecessary, but as I indicated, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to matters which deal with bodies incorporated, which may be subjected to their own litigation or be subjected to litigating, that we need to ensure that the framework and the language is correct and acceptable, and that is why we've come this morning, Mr. Speaker, to ask for that amendment. Mr. Speaker, perhaps finally I will just indicate that the government and this Parliament wants to have the full support of Parliament for this matter. It is non-contentious, but it is necessary. And it is in that vein that we are presenting this amendment of this bill, which is entitled the Seventh-day Adventist Church Incorporation Amendment Bill 2019. I ask that this House gives recognition of this bill for second reading and later on for its third reading, Mr. Speaker, if it pleases you.